Okay, as a lesbian, I have to constantly, and have had to for the last 16 years, defend my stance on marriage and being married. Like, I've been married to my wife for 10 years now, and I always get so, what's the word, activated when people talk about marriage in any capacity, especially if it's in like an anti-marriage way. So for context, I was raised in a reasonably traditional Church of England church. It was slightly more liberal the older that I got. So into my teenage years, I started seeing people who are kind of a bit more diverse in terms of like their queerness or their expression. So like one of our vergers was properly emo. He just like cloaked up over the top of the emo boots for Sunday services, ace, eyeliner, black nails and everything. And then we even got like a gay curate in my church as I was, later on in my church life, I guess. So I was raised like in the Church of England. I went to a Church of England school that was attached to my church. My choir at church was my entire social life. All of my friends went to the same school as me pretty much. And if they didn't, they went to a different Church of England school, I guess. And then when I was about 13, my mum decided that she wanted to become a priest. Like, she'd always wanted to be a priest, but they didn't ordain women when she was making her career choices, like in her teenage years. And that was fine. I was cool. I was like, you crack on, you do what you want to do. I was a teenager. I didn't really have many thoughts outside of like being a selfish teenager. And I feel like that's a rite of passage to do that. And then when I got to about, my queerness, my queer thoughts started around the time when I was probably about 15, 16. The usual like lesbian crushes of like a teacher that smiles at you when you hand in your essay, maybe an older person at school who is like kind, or not a complete dick, because a lot of older kids in school are complete dicks. And then started like developing proper queer feelings when I was about 18. And I always like had boyfriends. I was one of those girls in school that always had a boyfriend on rotation. Sometimes it was like the same boyfriend that I would go back and forth to, but like from my parents' point of view, my queerness came as a complete shock to them, because I always talked about boys, always did the like heteronormative thing of like, yeah, I'll get married to a man, I'll have babies. Actually, I think I did say to my mum like, oh, I'm never having kids, when I was like a teenager, because I'm the eldest of four, so there was always a lot of children around me, which was exhausting for me. Now I know that's because I'm autistic. And obviously children come with their own sensory bag of explosions, like noise and mess and stuff. And so when you're the older one, I just used to like get like kind of restraint collapse after school and just go and hide in my bedroom for hours just to be in my own space and solitude. So yeah, not becoming queer, but like leaning into my queerness in my teenage years, so like 18, 19, moving away because I knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to explore that, was not something I said explicitly out loud to my parents. So when I did come out, it was quite a big shock to my mum, I think, especially because of the thing that she does for work. And I don't want to speak on her behalf. This isn't about my coming out story, and it's not about my relationship with my mum, which is really great now. But my position on marriage is very much influenced by my upbringing and being autistic, and that persistent drive for autonomy, that demand avoidance. So a lot of the friends that I grew up with, that I'm still friends with now, are all straight, and a lot of them are in long-term relationships, but they are all not that bothered about marriage on one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've got friends, best friends, who are very anti-marriage, not because they don't commit to their long-term partners, but because they just don't, I think my interpretation of their view is that they don't see it as a necessity. Like, their commitment is through the house that they've bought together, or the pets that they're raising together, or the things that they decide to spend their time and energy investing in, and not having a piece of paper that says we are married to each other till death do us part, you know? And all of my friends are in long-term committed relationships, and I love that for them. And I am the token lesbian in the group. When I met my wife and we were together for a few years, I knew that I wanted to marry her. I wanted to kind of live out the life that had been modeled to me. And I have seen lots of successful marriages. My parents, my grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins now, even though they're younger than me, getting married and taking that step. That was always just it was a non-entity. It was a non-discussion. Like, I always just assumed that I would get married. My assumption was that in my earlier years was that I would marry a man, not a woman. So when it became very, very clear that I am a lesbian, I am going to spend my life with this person who is a woman, I had to really think like how I would navigate that system that was laid out for me, because I didn't know really that there was an alternative. And I had friends around me saying, I'm not going to do this marriage thing. But for me, I wanted to follow that system, and I wanted to follow it in a certain order because I knew that children were in my future. So for me, it was like, I want to get married, and then I want to buy a house, and then I want to do a bit of traveling and a bit of adventuring with my wife before we have a child, because that's the way things are done. Now I know that that is like those rules are kind of made up and just passed on as like, this is the way we do things as human beings. But I don't accept that now for myself or my kids or the people around me. Like, I'm just like, you do you crack on. If you're happy, I'm happy. If you're safe, we're cool. Like, I love that for you. Just do what you want to do. But I only know this now at the ripe old age of 36. I didn't know this at the age of 27, which is the age that I decided to propose to my wife, and then we got married like 6 months later. And we got engaged about 1 year after the law was changed in that gay people could get married. And I was like, great, we're going to be like one of the first lesbian couples in the UK. So within like the first year and a half of gay marriage being legalized. This is brilliant. This is such a good way to be demand avoidant. Like, if the demand is you must get married to a man, then I can challenge that. I can avoid that demand by going, well, I am going to get married, but I'm going to do it my fucking way, and I'm going to marry a woman. So fuck you. So we had a very traditional wedding. We both wore white dresses. I'll try and find a picture to put in here. In hindsight, I wish that I'd put a little bit more thought into what a gay wedding could look like. I know that everything was done correctly because we chose what we did. We had a huge wedding, like we had 140 people there. We had like 6 bridesmaids, flowers, photographer, videographer, camper van on the beach, beautiful pictures. If we renew our vows, which I really, really want to do next year, manifesting, I've got a place in mind. The tunnels, I'm talking to you. We want to renew our vows. And I don't want to subscribe to the whole, like, we both wear dresses because that's what girls do. Like, I'd like to be a bit more exploratory with my wedding style when we come around to renewing our vows, whether that's next year or like in 11 years time. Because now I know, and I've seen so many examples recently of lesbian weddings or queer weddings where people just wear like what they want, and they do their own take on wedding outfits, or they do their own take on traditions. Like, we had a sign in the entryway to our wedding that said, pick a seat, not a side, either way it's for a bride, because we didn't want to have just her family on one side and we didn't want to just have my family on my side. We wanted to, intermingle our family, and that's the way like families should come together in the case of a wedding and what follows on from that. But the reason I wanted to make this video is because I had a really interesting conversation with one of my friends the other day, and she was like, oh, I've got to go to a wedding because some people still subscribe to that. And I automatically felt like activated, so I was like, I still believe in marriage for lesbians, and I used the for lesbians as like a smokescreen humor in a way to kind of shield myself from the fact that I did feel activated and I did want to share why I still believe in marriage. And then we got into this really interesting conversation about how we were both raised in the church, and how when you're like a kid being raised in the Church of England, it's like your top priority must be to find a husband and make babies, because that is the way to be successful, to the detriment of all other things like your hobbies or your career or your self, your sense of self. You must prioritize finding a soulmate, even if it's completely the wrong person for you, even if this relationship will fail in 15 years' time. Make that your one priority, and just everything else will fall into place. The likelihood is that, yeah, you might learn something from a relationship that's gone wrong, but you also will, miss out on so many other things. I found the love of my life when I stopped looking for her. And I feel like that is an example of why, when you're fighting so hard for something, it sometimes can mean it's not the right thing. Like when I stopped looking for a new job, a couple of months later, I found a new job that I really, really like. And when you're fighting for friendships, should it be that hard? If you're fighting so hard in a relationship, I'm not saying relationships don't take work, they do. And if you're committing to a relationship, then that should be the most important work outside of the work you do on yourself, because it should be self first, then partner, then kids, then work, right? In the order of priorities. That's what I think anyway. But to come back to where my queerness fits into my spirituality, I don't consider myself to be a Christian anymore. Like, I do believe that Jesus probably was a man, a prophet, someone with a message, but so was Mohammed, right? And there are a lot of crossover between, for example, the teachings in the Quran and the Bible, and even like I was having a conversation with someone who ironically is gay and also Jewish, and she was saying like there is a lot of crossover between Judaism and Christianity, and I believe that all religions have a purpose, and that their purpose is to, sometimes we don't believe in something that we can't see, which sounds very Miracle on 34th Street, like, when she brings the $1 bill and she's like, in God we trust, and she's like, well, we can't see God, but we still believe in him, so why can't we believe in Santa Claus? Like, I feel that way. Like, we needed humans to bring the message of God, because we need someone who is believable, and we only really believe in what we can see and what we know. So believing a message from a human as a messenger is a great tool that God has used to speak to us, I believe. And in an ideal world, all of the major world religions, and even the ones that aren't considered major, like Rastafarianism, or some of the smaller, lesser known religious groups, they all have a purpose, and the purpose is mostly just to create community and to create a common sense of identity, I guess, and to share love and to share joy and to be supportive. In an ideal world, all religions should be able to coexist alongside each other. And I'm saying it in an ideal world because I love learning about religions and having discussions with other people, because ultimately what it comes down to is, I want to be treated right. I want to treat others with the same kindness I would want for myself. Love yourself as you love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Don't make false idols out of humans is another thing I think we could take well from like the 10 Commandments. And also, when you are so rigid, like I know a lot of people in my family and, people that have come into my life in different times that take the Bible as gospel. And it scares me that people would do that, because the Bible has been translated and interpreted in different ways by so many different people, and an interpretation of the Bible only takes in one person, the interpreter, one person's lived experience, and one person's take on the stories. And who knows what the original stories were? Who knows that lost, that translation and that recreation of stories doesn't completely change the original message. So I am very much like a deeply spiritual person, and I love listening to sacred music and singing sacred music, because that is my bread and butter. That's what I did my entire life from the age of 7 until the age of, like, when I moved here, basically 32. And I stopped singing. I've stopped singing for a while. I will go back to it. I really will. I had a conversation the other day about getting back to singing, because it's something that I so deeply enjoy, and it's something that makes me feel connected to the people that I'm singing with. It makes me feel like I have a community. It makes me feel like I'm worshipping and doing something for God and for myself, like creating art with your voice. That's fucking beautiful, isn't it? So poetic. So I love, like, when we went traveling, I loved exploring. So in Thailand, it's more Hindu temples, and then obviously in Bali, when we stayed in Gili T, our accommodation, our hotel was like just down the road from a mosque, and we would wake up to the sound of like the morning prayers like echoing out of the mosque every morning at like 5 a.m. and I find it really reassuring. And then when we were in Kuala Lumpur, we went to an amazing mosque, and I just find it so beautiful, like learning about other people's religions, because ultimately humans are so human, and at the end of the day, most of what humans want is acceptance and love and community. And I think that's really what it boils down to. So I hate the fact that we have these such rigid lines about, like, I am Christian and you are Muslim, therefore we cannot be in community with one another. When I was a teacher, I worked in a school in Essex, and I took my class to a Sikh Gurdwara, and we were there around the time that people were just going into prayer. So I think they separate the men and the women for prayer. But then afterwards, we all got to go downstairs and sit on the carpet, and they gave us all the food they had cooked, and that was just such a perfect demonstration of, yeah, these people are Sikh, and I was raised as a Christian, but yet look at where we are: white people, brown people, black people in community sharing a meal with each other, the basic human need for food and connection. And yeah, I love that for them, the class that I took. I loved them seeing that. I loved seeing it through their eyes and giving them that experience. That was invaluable and way, way cheaper to do a school trip to a Gurdwara than to a farm, for example, and just something that they wouldn't usually get to experience. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Or I have so much more to say on like where my queerness fits in. I did have a discussion with someone about a year ago who was also raised in the church and was also bisexual, so didn't feel like they could take their full self to church anymore. And I think that is part of the reason why I've fallen away from church, and also the fact that my wife is an atheist, which does make it tricky when you're raising children. Like, I would love my children to experience a church, a weekly church service, or just like a Christmas service, because they are so beautiful, and at Easter as well. It's just a sense of community. Let's go to church and let's make Easter hats or whatever they're doing in Sunday school, or let's take our kids to a Hindu temple, or when we go traveling, let's make sure they can see the golden Buddha, because it's amazing. And I want them to know that religions exist, even if they don't partake in anything religious. Being a queer family and attending church sounds like a huge juxtaposition, I suppose, a huge, what's the word? Contrast. And I still don't fully believe I can take my full queer self and rock up at a church that is maybe full of people that are way older and maybe more traditional. And that's obviously, I'm stereotyping them because I don't know, I suppose maybe I've made an assumption that the population that you might find in a traditional church might not be the kind of people that would be accepting of me, but I could be completely wrong. So maybe that's my way of verbally processing the fact that I could test the water. I probably would be safe if I took my kids to church and my wife to church and was like, hey, we're the only gays in the village and we need community. That would be interesting. And I know there are a lot of Christian groups out there that are very pro the queer community and work directly in teaching the Bible alongside queer acceptance. And I find that beautiful. I'm sure there are Christian groups that rock up at Pride to counteract the naysayers and the homophobes, the people that are homophobic under the guise of religion. That's what I hate, and I find that's what I would want to steer away from, because I just don't have the energy to educate people that are closed off to that. I want to say bigots, but they might be bigots just because no one's explicitly told them that someone can be gay and be a practicing Christian, or someone can be gay and be Muslim, or someone can be gay and be a spiritual person. So it's a very interesting topic. I would love to hear your thoughts about spirituality, about queerness, about your coming out. I'm going to do a whole other video about coming out, I think, because that is a whole other story. But also, it's not just my story, so I have to kind of be careful about the way that I go about telling that, and have to just tell it from my perspective, and not try and put words into other people's mouths or feelings from other people's brains that might not be true. So don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more weekly yappings, and let me know in the comments what you want me to talk about next week. Oh no, next week I'm off. I'm off next week. But let me know what you want to hear in the first week of May. I can't believe we're going into May. This year is going so fast. But I am here for the longer sunshiny days and the warmer weather. Okay, as always, take care, live slowly, and I'll see you soon. Love you, bye.